Welcome back to the Upper Tier Podcast, the football podcast we bring you each and every day now on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. Joining me today for an interesting episode where we're going to take a look at this whole COVID situation where Omicron causing chaos in the UK in terms of the football world and in terms of the public with massive cases at the moment. But what is going to be the impact for this on the Premier League? Darren, how are we, my man?
I'm all good, brother Niall. I'm all good.
Good to have you on. Where do we begin with this? I mean, this has just kind of literally come out of nowhere, hasn't it? And it's just turned things upside down again in terms of the footballing world.
This is almost like wave number one for me. You know, that unknown phenomenon that kind of gripped us, obviously, and, you know, threw us all into that self-doubt mode and, you know, caused all the chaos with the league games and stuff like that. And, you know, and teams going out to play in empty stadiums and stuff like that. Like that's going to be a weird watching the Premier League years, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so weird, especially for like as we said before, like for the bigger clubs, it kind of affected them a little bit more because they hadn't got the crowd, especially like Liverpool and Anfield or United at Old Trafford. And it sort of gave a little bit of an edge to the smaller teams that were going there to play because they didn't have the crowd on top of them, especially for Liverpool. We call it the 12th man there at Anfield in theory, you know. But this has just come out of nowhere, like, and there's so much stuff now that has climbed out of the woodwork over the last few days that is very kind of concerning. Like looking at the level of vaccination rates in the Premier League and stuff like that. They were doing a comparable yesterday. 68% vaccination rates in the Premier League, 32 unvaccinated, compared to, I think I was looking at Italy, Spain, and France and Portugal, I think it was, that were anywhere between 92 and 98%. Like it's strange, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, you know, and to be honest with you, like everybody knows there's a bit of a divide at the minute, isn't it? Between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated and stuff like that. And it's socially it's causing difficulty as well. But like, I mean, you know, I think, to be honest, if you're a Premier League player and you're not vaccinated, you know, I think this is something that the club should have taken out of the hands of the players, if I'm honest. You know, this is like treatment for an injury, almost. Yeah. Like if somebody broke their leg, would they refuse treatment?
The operation.
They refuse an operation? Would they refuse? I don't think they would, you know. And I'm sure a lot of the guys, you know, the 32% of lads that haven't taken it, I'm sure they've put far worse into their bodies on occasion as well, you know.
No, I found it weird because we're not talking about, you know, we're not talking about the average Joe Schmo on the street here who, like, you know, is anti-vaxxer or doesn't want to take a vaccine or doesn't believe in it yet or wants to see how things pan out and is concerned about the level of testing that's going on with these and doesn't want to be putting a foreign body into his body and all that. And we respect that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I think in the case of these guys, these are professional athletes who have a duty of care to look after their fitness and their well-being. Especially these days. I mean, if you look at football in the old days, lads went out, they played a match, they won or lost a match, they went out for the feed of points and allowed a takeaway and all that years ago. But now it's a different world. Now they have a duty of care. But they also, like, they have a solidarity as well to their teammates, don't they? And their club and their family and their extended family in this whole thing, don't they?
They should. But I think that's probably where, you know, the divide has been created, hasn't it? You know, and again, we're not here to judge people and say what's right and what's wrong, but, you know, I do feel like there's a certain amount of this comes down to people trying to create headlines as well, where, you know, if I'm anti-vaccine and, you know, I'm anti-vaccination and I'm a Premier League player, you know, maybe that boosts my profile even, you know, because I'm in the headlines. You know, they say there's no such thing as bad publicity, is there? it's a strange one, I have to say. Like for the players to be left with this decision, is very strange. I think in the situation they're in, and to protect their teammates and to protect their teammates' families. Like, football for me has always been about going to war with a bloke. You know what I mean? Like, you look at I was a goalkeeper. I'd look at me back four, and I know those four lads would do anything to stop that ball getting as far as me. And I know they knew that the boys in front of them would do that, and so on. And that's what brought you all together, and that's what that camaraderie and stuff like that, and that team bond and everything like that, and this fighting spirit you had. It's kind of tough to have that when you've got 30% of your squad maybe who aren't pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
And like that's difficult. That would be very difficult in a dressing room, I have to say. Yeah,
because it's kind of weird. It's like as if there's a solidarity on the pitch, but not a solidarity off the pitch. And it's just very strange. Two things I wanted to ask you. One is, what was, there was a lot of talk going on over the last few days that these players should be treated as same as an injured player, and that the game shouldn't be getting called off, that teams have squads. But obviously, if you get an outbreak of this, I think I was looking at numbers today in relation to Man United or something like that. Apparently there's 19. Now, that's not all playing staff. There's some like club staff as well involved in that. But it's somewhere around the 19 mark. But I think if you have 19 cases, can you really pad that out in reality?
I don't think so, personally. But again, and I 100% understand where managers are coming from about this, is there a line that you get to, and that when you cross that line, your game is cancelled, your game is postponed or whatever? Because I think there's a lot of managers and teams out there who are feeling almost victimised by this, by the FA and the way this has gone, and the Premier League themselves and the way things have gone about, it can feel like maybe the bigger clubs are being treated unfairly with an unfair advantage. I know we've heard Brendan Rodgers come out and he said, we didn't have our game called off, but such and such a team did, and such and such, that kind of thing. And that's not easy for teams. It's not easy at all, because then you're looking and you're going, well, does my safety, does my importance, does my not mean as much as Spurs or as Liverpool or United or Chelsea, and that's, you don't want to create that divide either.
But let's suppose, is there a case for a situation? I looked in Germany as well with Bayern Munich, and they had a case with your man Kimmich, the player, who, as far as I know, the story was that he isn't vaccinated, but he had to isolate. Either he had gotten COVID or he had to isolate because he was a close contact or whatever it is, and they docked his wages. Is that a case? Is that the reality, or is the reality that, let's suppose we'll take Man United as an example, just okay? They've 19 people out. They can't field the team. If you look at United's vaccination program, let's suppose, for argument's sake, it's at 55%. I don't know what it is. It's probably much higher, no doubt. But let's suppose it's at 55%. Is there a case for turning around to that club and saying, well, your vaccination program is at 55 or 60%. You're after getting 19 people here with cases. You can't field the team. So we're going to give the other team a walkover, and they're going to get the 3 points. Is there a case for that, or is that the way that we have to drive home mandatory vaccination? Or do you think mandatory vaccination should be a thing at this level?
So for me, I think the resulting should absolutely be, I would be in favour of that myself. That should be a thing. If your vaccination rate is particularly low, and again, maybe that's something where the league set a boundary and say, anything below 80%, if you have a game called off, we're going to hit you. We're going to hit you with a points deduction, and maybe it'll re-allow you to play that game so that you can win the points back, or we give the 3-0 walkover to the other side. If they've got their vaccination rate up high enough, I think, listen, it's the biggest football league in the world, isn't it? And we talk about it all the time and stuff like that. And really and truly, like, I think it should be mandatory, shouldn't it? I do personally. I think we've got to the stage where, this is important, and for the good of the players on the pitch, for the good of the fans, the terraces, and for the good of the people in the jobs and in the positions in clubs. Everybody needs to get the show back on the road, so to speak, and we don't need these breaks and stuff like that. And I think it should be mandatory, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was sort of looking at it there yesterday, and they were talking about, we heard Thomas Frank from Brentford the other day calling for a circuit break where you take out this weekend's fixtures and maybe anything that was planned next week. And then it means it safeguards the Christmas period, if you like, which is heavily reliant in terms of the Premier League, because there's a lot of money that they've made off that in terms of this whole Amazon deal.
Yeah.
That could really fall flat on its face, which would be a disaster for them, But what was your thinking? I mean, Klopp obviously came out as well, and he turned around. He's been quite vocal about this, in terms of saying, we should trust the experts. Why do we question the experts? These guys, this is their field of expertise. Just like I'm a coach and these are professional footballers. People don't tell them how to play football or how to do their fitness and stuff like that. We get on with it and stuff like that. So he was kind of saying, that, like, what would a circuit break do? Where we only kind of kicking the can down the road, basically. Like, we give a circuit break this week, and then next week we have a massive outbreak and we shut down anyway. So he didn't think it would resolve anything, and he thought his thinking was, if you're able to field a squad for match day, the match should go ahead.
Yeah, and like, I would agree with a lot of what he's saying, but again, where's the line in the sand? Where's, if you're able to field a squad? Like,
well, it can only be numbers, can't it? Because you can't then get into, well, the level of this player versus the level of that player. Like, we played a game against Newcastle the other night. We lost Fabinho and Van Dijk, two massive players for us. So yes. do they count as one player or two players, or you know what I mean?
No, but that's my point. So I mean, if the league turned around and said, like, if you've got anything over 10, 14 players, there's the line. Anything below 10, you play. Anything above 10, we postpone the game. And we want to know what your legitimate first team squad is right now. We want to know how many's in your squad, and maybe you're only allowed to name a certain number. Maybe you're only allowed to name 35.
Yeah.
And when you crop over a certain line, the game is postponed, and when it's below a certain line, the game goes on.
Yeah.
And you go on with what you have. And that's just look at the draw. But there needs to be, an idea of where the line in the sand is for me.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because we see it with Leeds and Arsenal and all their Leeds. They had to name a 15-year-old on their side tonight against Arsenal. You know what I mean? It's a tough call for teams at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. And like, we know, we've spoken about that Leeds squad before. We know how threadbare it is. Anyway, it's one of the poorest squads in the league. For numbers, listen. There's a plus point to this. Well, when I said there's a plus point, here's a 15-year-old kid getting an opportunity that we don't always guarantee, because if all the boys are there, maybe he doesn't get a game, maybe he does, you know what I mean. So opportunities for younger players isn't something we want to oust. But again, I definitely think there should be a definitive line in the sand drawn, and it's, if we go over this number, this is how it happens, and that's just it.
Yeah. What you're thinking in terms of, I mean, the Premier League have put in a couple of new COVID restriction sort of measures, if you like, where they're looking into now fans and stuff like that, and that you have to produce, your COVID cert or whatever the equivalent is in the UK, and they're obviously going to, I mean, they obviously can't test them all, so they have to spot check them. So apparently they're going around outside grounds doing spot checks and stuff like that and all. But I suppose the way this is multiplying at the moment, and how contagious this version of it is, even though it may or may not be significantly dangerous in terms of how sick you get from it, but the spread of it seems very high. I mean, I noticed our own numbers today are 7,400, which is, for us, I know it pales in comparison to the UK getting 88 or 90,000 in a day, but they're huge.
But our population does.
Yeah,
so
it's huge for us.
It's economies of scale, really,
Yeah.
And I've heard doctors talk about it. I think I heard the doctor who discovered the variant in South Africa, and she said it's far more transmissible than any other variant.
Yeah.
Say that, you know, the outcome of it will be diminished because it's not as physical on your body and stuff like that, and it doesn't put you in the kind of danger that maybe the Delta variant did.
Yeah, she was saying it was kind of like a mild flu, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that it was extremely conducive to being spread, you know?
Yeah. If we're going to see more games being postponed, and I suppose I'm talking here, the prime example at the moment, I suppose, is Spurs. Because if the game against Liverpool was to be postponed, that's 4 games. And the question is then, in terms of fixture congestion, like we're talking about postponing games because we're concerned about the health of players. But what about the health of players if you start having to play 3 games in a week?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you totally. I suppose, you know, I kind of thought about it earlier and I was thinking, you know, what could we do there? And I don't really think that there's a way around it, to be honest with you. Because obviously the guys need to finish because, you know, they need a certain amount of rest. So it's going to mean fitting games in anywhere along the schedule. I suppose you hope maybe Spurs end up going out soon enough in the cup and stuff like that, you know, which hopefully then buys them a bit of time on maybe.
Well, I suppose to summarise, I mean, the health of the players has to be paramount, and of course of their extended families and all members of staff at these clubs. But it would be terrible, wouldn't it? I mean, if the Christmas and the New Year period of football was cancelled, it's the greatest time in the year really for football fans. Really, so many fixtures, so much football going on. But we can't deny that this variant is rampant. And with such low vaccination rates, the Premier League is really going to have to come out with a directive or a set of principles to figure out how they can keep games going. They'll have to assess if taking a circuit break will achieve anything or will it just kick the issue further down the road. And overall, what is their plan? How are they going to control this going forward? How, like, our team's going to have to go back performing again without crowds? Are they going to have to be, you know, full-time back in their bubbles again and all this kind of thing? They're just going to have to figure out every step of the way on this and give teams proper direction so they can work through this and not be going against each other at times like this where it's really, really difficult. And, you know, you have to understand, I mean, we've got a lot of teams in there at the moment that have big squads that might be capable of keeping it going. Whereas you've other teams there, smaller teams who would have smaller squads who may not be able to handle these outbreaks. And we have to be conscious of that as well, because we don't want the competitive nature of the Premier League. We don't want that to dissipate into this season as well and just let it peter out. And it looks like this situation could be around for a number of weeks, to say the least. But until next time, it was brilliant having Darren on to get his thoughts. So yeah, something he had to slip away or something like that. Maybe the variant attacked his Wi-Fi or something like that. Until next time, this has been the Upper Tier, where we've taken a look at the effect of COVID on the Premier League at the moment, where it's running rampant and creating havoc with the fixture list. And that's something that they're all going to have to just try and figure out. Till next time, Dynamo Podcast Network on YouTube, Spotify for audio versions of the show. Drop into the comments what you think. How do you feel about your team? Are you going to be able to withstand this current outbreak? Are you going to be able to catch up on all these fixtures? Or does the Premier League have to look at this in a different way? Till next time, thank you.